Welcome everyone to Alumni Relations, Do's, Don'ts, and What Ifs of Preparing for the Fall. I'm your host, Jay Dillon, Executive Director of Alumni Relations for the University of California at Berkeley. We're so glad you're here. We're delighted to have you with us for this, our fourth in a series of coffee chats being put forward by our alumni engagement community of practice. A little bit more on that later. Before we begin, I want to call your attention to the slide now on your screen with some tips about how to best experience this session. Specifically, we'd like you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And you can also upvote those questions as well, even those that are asked by others. As for the chat, we've all been in Zoom land now for some time, so let's reserve the chat for positive comments and sharing resources with one another. And just a quick note, both the Q&A and the chat are not anonymous, and we will be sharing out both the Q&A and chat text, along with the recording to all of our live attendees. This will also be available on demand as well. And we'll leave this slide up just for a moment as others join our session today. We are very happy to have you with us to talk about all things alumni engagement and preparing for the fall. With me today is a panel of experts with decades of experience running alumni organizations at R1 public and private universities. Our hope is for our conversation today to be as in-depth and as informal as possible, as we talk through the real challenges that are facing advancement and particularly alumni relations at this time and well into the future, it seems. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions for today's webinar. We had over 150 questions come in through the registration. We've tried to bucket those questions into some themes, and here they are. First, we're going to talk about immediate ideas, the do's, don'ts, and what ifs. Next, we're going to ask our panelists about addressing racial and social justice through alumni programming, marketing communications, and institutionally. Then we're going to talk about something on everyone's mind, of course, the pressures of the pandemic, and where have our panelists found opportunities to try new things. We will get to your questions as quickly as possible. We hope to reserve the second half of this session just for your live questions. Finally, after the Q&A portion, we've invited back a number of our speakers from our previous webinars to ask them a simple question: what have you learned in these past few months? And we'll get 1 minute of wisdom from several of those experts. So simply put, we want you to learn a lot, have fun, and learn a lot. So let's begin. So our first question, I'll let each of my colleagues introduce themselves as they respond to this question here. Now, we've been at this virtual engagement business for a hot minute, as one of my mentors would say, and perhaps we've gotten over the hump here. So now as we look forward to the fall, this transition from in-person to digital has taken place. To my panelists here, what are your do's and don'ts and what ifs, the things that are on your mind most for fall 2020? And I'm going to turn first, Mo, to you.
Thank you, Jay. Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Mo Colley. I'm the Vice President for Alumni Relations and Communications at the University of Connecticut. I will tell you the things that are on my mind for the fall, and actually even into the future, are the fact that we're not going to have in-person events, and really putting that into the kind of atmosphere of what we're doing. Our teams had been thinking about what if, different schools had released guidelines, and we just had to go ahead and call it for the year and say we are not going to do any in-person mass events for the year. The do's are, but then how do we, we have pivoted and we did kind of get into this virtual space, and we've done it with some really great success. So we really want to capitalize on that and recognize that things could still change, right? We do have some smaller groups getting together to talk about, getting together virtually, to talk about what if for next year even. Could we, in June, begin to have our big celebration that we've been planning? And so for our team, we actually had to let them grieve a little about that, because I think everyone thought we'll get through the summer and we'll start planning in person and we'll be fine and back to normal. And clearly all of you from around the country and the world see that we're in a new normal, a different normal, whatever that looks like. So for us, planning in person is on hold for the year. We will continue to leverage incredible virtual opportunities. And I'm actually stealing from a number of people on this panel and on this webinar. And the don'ts are, don't be afraid to try something new. We've had to do it. We're going to continue to do it. We're going to continue to test to see what works. And so those are a few of the things that are kind of on UConn's plate at the moment.
Thank you, Mo. Words of wisdom always flowing out of you and UConn. So thank you for joining us today. And I love the concept of borrowing and taking from our colleagues. That's what our alumni engagement community practice is all about. So the do's, don'ts, and what ifs coming from Indiana University. JT.
Sure. Hi, my name is JT Forbes. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Indiana University Alumni Association. We made a decision early to really pivot with a 5-point plan. We started with an effort to really reach out with a lot of care and empathy to our network of volunteers and leaders. We launched some virtual experiments. We launched a virtual book club, for example, and really had kind of a plan to really execute. What we learned from that was that the do's. First, we've learned that we really need to approach that in a spirit of continuous improvement and experimentation. We need to find simple ways to collect participant feedback, refine our approach based on that feedback, and share what we learn with our stakeholders so that they know we're listening and adapting based on what they've shared. The effort to kind of say we were going to do these 5 things as best we could really taught us that declaring a clear direction and planning in a few things done well mode keeps others from making a plan for you. We also took one thing at a time. We didn't have to have it all figured out right now. It's a process that we're all still going through. And once you have the plan, share it with the ones that would make it for you, because that invites some collaboration and some feedback. On the don'ts, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Accept that this is a process of continuing improvement, and you're not going to please everybody all the time or get it perfect at the start. Don't let things get overly complex in implementation. Everybody, the people you're trying to reach, the people that you're working with to implement, is distracted and overwhelmed. So just keep things as frictionless and simple as possible. We learned not to put extra pressure on ourselves. Do what we can every day to do what we can. We are all living in scenarios where we have pets and loved ones and roommates and others as coworkers now, and we just have to give ourselves some grace. And assume that others will do that. And for example, they'll give you grace for putting things on pause. One of the things that we look at is why hold long board meetings if what people really need are just brief updates and check-ins. And on the what-ifs, being nimble and flexible gives you the space to adapt and react to the unexpected. So saying you're going to boldly go digital and committing to that course is better than hoping and waiting to the last minute to see what happens.
Thank you, JT. A few things that stood out for me from your comments is this spirit of continuous improvement that you talk about is a wonderful way to counter the permanence of this pandemic, and doing a few things well so others don't plan for you. I think everyone was chuckling when you said that on the call. We have all experienced that. So now to my good friend, Ralph Amos at Caltech. Ralph, do's, don'ts, and what ifs for the fall.
Good day, everyone. Ralph Amos here, Assistant Vice President of Alumni Relations and the Executive Director of the Caltech Alumni Association. Yes, this has been in our lives in a really dynamic and robust manner. So we took it and we are taking it as this is the ball that has been thrown to us. manage it. So much to Mo and JT's point, it was this notion of there were things that are immediately before us, and we need to find how are we going to pivot and do it successfully as we can. And the benefit of this pandemic is that everyone's in the same boat. So there is sort of an ease and grace that has come with it that I find very refreshing. So one of the major initiatives that was to do, we had our annual, what we call Alumni Day. It's a seminar day. Historically, we have about 850 alumni come to campus here in Pasadena, and they listen to horribly complex conversations about bending black holes and things that I frankly don't understand. Anyway, this is how we engage. We needed to deliver it online because most of the segment that attends this particular event are those at risk for the virus. So they shouldn't have come to campus, even though it was in that window of, we were still getting together in groups prior to face mask wearing. So we said, we're moving it online. We took what would normally be 25 to 30 sessions. We condensed it to 4 sort of master level courses. We delivered it with one of our local talents from the LA Times as the moderator. And she brought on and walked through a chief virologist who looks at HIV/AIDS, talks about this pandemic and how it's going to affect us. We looked at JPL and the Mars landing that will take place, and looking at the impact financially and economically on through pandemics and epidemics throughout history. So it was, we did it. We went from our typical 850, 900, we had 2,500 registrants who attended. So we tripled the number of people who attended this event, and we felt that it enabled us to think differently. We are doing, not trying to hold on to what we've done over the last 83 years, but looking to what we're going to do for next year's plan, because we know we probably will not be together again. And I think for the new folks that have come in for us across higher education, we probably don't want to try to stick with the past, because this is the way they have engaged with us, and we'll need to keep it going. So recognize that we'll never be the same. It's really going to be the thing that keeps you and your staff healthy and not running yourself into the ground. I believe that we've removed barriers by going digitally. We'll never replace face-to-face, but we'll have to be more strategic about that, and it better be equally as valuable as what folks are doing, where we're doing it for free, and they're doing it really at a time that they want to engage, even if it's recorded. So I'm going to stop there and just be excited about the future. Don't be afraid. Go for it.
Motivation from Ralph. Thank you. And I've also think you've come up with our next webinar title for this Alumni Community of Practice series. As I got it, we're going to do something on horribly complex conversations of bending black holes. That sounds amazing, Ralph. Thank you. All right. I want to also just take a moment to acknowledge all of the wonderful conversation that's taking place in the chat. Everyone introducing themselves and where they're from. That's what this alumni community is all about. We've got folks chiming in from Armenia, India, all over the United States, Canada, Latin America. We're so glad that you can be with us and that you've taken the time out of what might be the early morning or very late evening to join us. So engagement delivery is not the only thing that needs reframing this fall. Racial and social justice has been thrust into the national conversation in a way that it should be, in a way that we must acknowledge and we must speak up to as both educators and community builders for our institutions and our alumni. So the question here from my panelists is, how should alumni relations professionals address these issues this fall? And again, Mo, I'm going to go first to you.
Thanks, Jay. I'll speak from the perspective of kind of what UConn has done, and also share what we've done that I thought was great and what I think we did as a little misstep. And I'll start actually with the misstep. The misstep happened right as things were bubbling up, and what happened with George Floyd. Our administration didn't respond. Didn't respond quickly, from our university president to our CEO, and we were actually getting pressure from our internal staff to start having a conversation. What are you going to say? What are you going to do? And while we ultimately did respond, and I think the response that we had in a statement and some programming that we put in place ultimately addressed the conversation, the lack of response and timing from something that was so horrific, and also in addition to what was already happening systematically, we just kind of goofed. And to be honest, there was no one way to do it, but from my perspective, as a person sitting on the alumni side of the house and as an African-American woman, we took a long time to figure out what we were going to say, and then how we were going to say it, and whether or not we were going to be offending folks to say it. So that's a misstep, and something that we've learned from, and that's something that moving forward, it's really changed the way that we're actually looking at our work, both internally to the UConn Foundation and externally to our alumni constituents. What I thought we did that was great was that, again, that partnership and collaboration was we were able to launch an incredible panel town hall conversation with some nationally known folks that are partners with UConn and through our African American Alumni Culture Center. There were so many good pieces that came out of that town hall that we're still actually unpacking. Small segment groups that we're going to get talking together, but a real and honest conversation from folks not only in the African American Culture Center, but from the medical side, to talk about the disparity of what COVID was doing, in particular to the African American community and other communities of color. So what the good came out of it is that all of a sudden now the conversation was able to be had. Where we continue to need to evolve is action, right? You can talk about how this is systematic, and you can talk about how horrible it is, but we're really challenging ourselves and our alumni community to act, and putting together some pieces for them to actually act in the future.
Thank you, Mo. That's very well said. And a special thank you for opening up with a misstep and being vulnerable enough to share with our community what some of those challenges have been, and then also where you've evolved into action. I think that's great. Thank you. JT, how about a perspective from you?
Sure, thank you. My comments are going to focus on personal leadership and what we as leaders can do within our sphere of authority and influence. And I'm going to take a moment to kind of lead, to give some guidance from what I've been learning. And I certainly have more to learn. And so it's really speaking to predominantly the non-Black people on this call. There's really 3 actions you can take to be more anti-racist and empathetic on a personal level. You can become better educated about the Black experience. You can become more aware and reflective of your implicit biases and blind spots, and become more accountable for being anti-racist. There's 3 not to do's. Don't call your Black friends to apologize. That makes it about you. Don't ask your Black friends what you should do. Your growth is your job. It's not their job. And don't seek the truth or to change the world on Facebook and other platforms. This is a soul-sucking, time-wasting exercise. And then the guidance I'd offer for all of us, whether you're leading a whole big organization or working for somebody else or wherever you fit, it's just really important that we all seek understanding by reading, listening, and getting clarity on what we personally need to do and will do. And then make a formal declaration to yourself and others about what you will do. Hold yourself accountable and ask your allies to help you be accountable. We all have a role to play in this. We all have work to do, and we all need to be clear on what personal commitments we're going to make, and also the personal learning and growth and outreach that we need to do in order to really solve it from the core of our souls.
Thank you, JT, again, for a very personal reflection on what is an incredibly challenging time for our Black colleagues. I'd like to turn to my good friend again, Ralph, and ask for his perspective on these issues this fall. Ralph, what's on your mind?
Well, it's I think this matter, this focus, this reality has been on my mind for now 57 years, all my life. So as a Black male, I think we must recognize, and I'll take a lot of the snippets that came from our good colleagues Mo and JT, and recognize that we are in higher education and we work in and for institutions that are systemically racist by their very structure, their practices, and their policies. Walk through your halls and look at your practices as an alumni association to recognize that often the very things we say and do were crafted and created at a time where the very tenets of these policies excluded others. It could be on gender, it could be on race, it could be on religious belief and practice. So we must understand that's systemic. What America faces as a country is going to be very difficult because it's baked in. It's been baked in for 400 years. And we won't heal from it until we all recognize what that baked product looks like and understand what it means. You start locally, start with yourself. I ask that if you don't have friends who don't look, think, and believe like you, then go make those friends so you can understand face to face what that means, what it looks like, and you will find that there is a quality in just living on the planet. And then you can start to think, look to your leadership at your university to see, are we going to take those big steps? Until the presidents of our institutions say, this shall be changed, or our board of trustees say, this shall change, and they have people of diverse backgrounds sitting in those leadership meetings, it won't change. If our corporations don't look carefully and say, hey, Starbucks, we are going to change, and this no longer will be tolerated, that this has to be clear, and every employee, if they intend to continue working there, must be a part of that and not practice it. And we must hold ourselves, as JT said, accountable. So this won't be easy. I think there will be more tears, and to the point of not going to your Black friends, you know, we have to go through the post-traumatic stress of this every time this has happened, and this has been going on for hundreds of years. So everyone just be brave, be bold, and be deliberate, and I think we can start living the conversation. I mean, it's different now. I think this George Floyd issue has changed it. It's out in front, and I think the modern generations of our graduates are not probably going to tolerate it in the lives they lead for us. I look forward to that impact they'll have.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you to all three of our panelists for helping bring some clarity to this issue and your own perspectives as well. So many positive comments from our community in the chat. And again, we will share out those comments and resources as a part of this recording. So everyone, thank you. Practically speaking, COVID-19 has now been with us for some 4 or 5 months, and will continue to be into the future, and it's applying pressure everywhere to our alumni organizations. It's in a myriad of ways: our programs, our business development, revenue, membership, other pieces that we lean on in terms of our volunteers who are used to planning in-person events when we can no longer have them. So here's a question for our panelists. Where have your organizations felt the pressure of the pandemic most? And where have you found opportunities to try something new? Ralph, I'm going to bring this one straight to you.
I'm going to go back to what my colleagues were saying, is like, just go with it. This is the time to try the things that you've wished you've tried for your whole career. Our board meetings would be 2 days long and cost about, $15,000 each time we bring the board in. Our meetings are now 2 hours long. We do them through Zoom, and all of our committee meetings, we've now added those, and we've literally changed the entirety of the organization. We're focused on the active participation engagement of the graduates, and it is less expensive to engage, like I said, threefold on the alumni base. So that's a change that we've made. Our budget has not seen the expenses associated with tailgates or anything like that. I mean, especially here at Caltech. But we're going to take those dollars and invest them into technologies that help people to connect with each other. And we're very excited about that. The things that I think are hard is like, how do you measure, are we engaging? I mean, one thing to look at is look at the new people that are coming in. And they are folks and segments we've not seen before, ever in my career. And I think we have a huge responsibility to not try to contract and go back to what we did, last year. Let's think about what does the new world look like, find out the type of partners that we can pull together and go for it. don't be scared. You have almost nothing to lose. You have everything to gain. The hearts of our graduates.
Thank you, Ralph. We've got to take some of those and put them on an alumni community practice t-shirt. I'm just writing them down. Don't be afraid, be brave, just go with it. So much better than the Nike motto. Thank you. Mo, how about your perspective here? This pressures of the pandemic, any new opportunities that you've found at UConn?
Sure. I think initially we at the alumni office were feeling some pressure because so many people jumped out ahead. Like, oh, there's this group, I'm looking at you, Julie, from UCLA, who was able to launch so many things quickly, and were we kind of behind? And I think we did it the right way. We really began to put together our Husky Hub, which is kind of a one-stop shop for our alumni and donors to kind of see what's going on. We really, giving a kudos to my engagement team for reaching out to our volunteers, doing some fun trivia nights, testing the technology of Zoom, using those breakout rooms to hold different conversations, and also leveraging some of the incredible talent that we have here at UConn. Our paint night, having a UConn faculty member lead both a painting and a drawing. You know, you have 200 and some people now, not bound by a 40-person room, sharing in the love of UConn, painting and sharing that with their family. And then also making sure that we continue to test virtual wine tastings. We've literally been able to take some of our incredible 1881 series with our breweries and our wineries and put it virtually. And, you know, I've had people from all over the country say, oh my gosh, I can now do this in my own home and can participate. And so to Ralph's point, you've kind of blown up the whole regionality of how we were actually constructing many of our clubs and volunteer groups. And to that point, we can't go back. We are connecting with people all over the country. We do not have the bandwidth to send an alumni staff person to every part of the country. Virtual engagement is here to stay. And so I just feel the pressure to continue to do more and test and be excited about it and deliver those results to our alumni and donors.
Thank you, Mo. That's great. Delivering results is something I feel that we are all being asked to do more and more often now in this virtual space. And that kind of takes us to our first audience question here. So we're about halfway through the session. We promise to get to as many of your questions as possible. So here we go. We've had several come through Zoom. Again, we've been trying to bucket these a bit. And thank you everyone for upvoting questions as well. So JT, this first question is about Zoom. Actually, it's about Zoom fatigue. So how do we combat this very real phenomenon, not only with our staff, but also with our volunteers and the alumni who we hope to attend our virtual events?
Sure. Well, first, Zoom fatigue is real. It takes a lot of mental stamina to be working online and remotely in this new mode where we find ourselves. There's a lot of great advice on how you can cope with the Zoom fatigue. Just do a search and it surfaces some really good stuff. I think Chris Marshall's on here. He's found one of the best articles, and I hope he'll throw that link up in the chat so people can check that out. The advice that makes the most sense to me is really limiting the number of Zoom meetings. You just can't do them all the time and really bring your best to it all the time. Turning off video when I'm not presenting or speaking in a lot of meetings, because that allows me to really focus in on the speaker. Calling people on this thing called a telephone when it works just as well and sometimes maybe better, especially if we're feeling that fatigue. I often will text first and say, hey, can you take a call, to honor the people's different schedules and rhythms. And then take a moment to be present before you log on, especially if you're in one of those where sometimes you have meetings after meetings because you can't control the schedule. You know, just take that breath or take that walk or use your phone to walk around when you do these so you're not just constantly in the same space, if that helps you. I'm experimenting with some other things like shortening meetings and working hard not to multitask during meetings, especially when that video's off and you got a lot of time pressures. I think if you're a supervisor, it's important to allow people time to pause, to deal with loved ones and other coworkers during the meetings. One of my favorite things is the being able to connect with folks, younger kids who I used to get to see in the office. We'll just stop for a moment and make sure that their needs are attended to and take all the pressure off of trying to create this kind of false reality. And I just think another part of this is it's really good to make calls or Zoom sessions with colleagues just to check in with no business, just to make sure everybody's okay. Now to the substance of the other side of this. You have a lot of options, and likely more will emerge as we experiment and share what works. Some things that we've tried and things that make a lot of sense based on some research we've done are, one, think about doing some asynchronous video that people can watch at their own pace and time, and then offer a Q&A or other live follow-up session for those who want to dive deeper. One of the virtues of this is people can look at all this at different times and maybe get more out of it than if it's just one more thing or opting out because it's one more thing. Also think about breaking content and meetings into shorter segments. For example, our alumni research that we were doing before all this hit said that our alumni were more likely to engage in podcasts that were 20 minutes or less. So let's think about shorter bites, especially if you're doing this asynchronous thing. I participated in a really powerful workshop on anti-racism that was 20 minutes of presentation, and then the rest was all free-form Q&A, and it was powerful. I think I learned more that way than an hour lecture. And then another thing to think about is mindfulness around establishing rules at the beginning that give people permission to turn off their video. You know, think about how you could use slides and video to tell a story, to break up the droning of a speaker that goes on too long, and have an agenda and stick to it. And if you can, especially if it's a large complex meeting with a lot of players and content, rehearse or at least converse prior to the meeting so you know everything works and everybody's ready and you can put your best foot forward. Because the Zoom fatigue is sometimes a function of just people getting worn down with bad production values and glitchiness and lack of preparation. So make it compelling and powerful by doing those things.
Thank you, JT. A good old-fashioned phone call. I get really excited when someone decides to have a phone call instead of a Zoom meeting, an opportunity to get out and walk around, and some real great nuggets of advice there from things you've tried. And I love to hear the R word, research. We need more research in our industry, and that's something I hope we'll see a great deal more of as we address these issues. I want to acknowledge for a moment, great conversation going on in the chat, which again, you can access afterward with the recording, some resources around digital engagement and how best to do digital marketing. And we also have a webinar from the alumni community of practice called Alumni Relations in Digital Spaces, and we'll drop the link into the chat there as well. So thank you, JT. Ralph, I'm actually going to turn to you with this next question, if that's okay. A lot of folks are asking about volunteers. Now, we know that volunteers go rogue under normal circumstances. What do we do now that we do not have in-person events for them to plan? And they are maybe picking up and doing things in the name of their alma mater and our institution that may not quite be aligned with our strategy.
I think a couple of things, and I'm only able to say this after 30 years into business, is sometimes we can bring it down and just relax a little bit. I truly believe that most of our alumni, even the hyper engaged, the overly passionate, their intentions are good. And you know, sometimes I've seen, and I know you've seen this, they knock something out of the park and the alumni like it and they do it. Now, you got to make certain that it's not, you know, separatist or racist or anything like that, of course, but along that way, they live out in a world that we're not living, and they may be onto something that people need. You know, often if the content's about their personal self or their professional self, it's going to work. Their intellectual self, at, you know, a lot of our institutions are very nerdy. You know, that can matter. And if they're making it local, we should suspect and probably be kind of refreshed that it truly is about them in Boston, and it's not going to work in LA. And here we are using the LA mindset to, and you know, how many places are like LA, God knows. So think about it in a broad way, follow up on it to see, did it work for that market, and understand why it worked to your research point. I think go with it. I think the world is ready for better, different, and I submit even sometimes provocative.
I agree with you, Ralph. The world is ready for different and provocative. And sometimes our volunteers can challenge us and bring new ideas. As you said it nicely, doesn't meet the LA mindset. There certainly is a mindset here at Berkeley as well. Mo, I saved this question for you, and it's been upvoted almost more than anything else here. Galas and virtual events, things like homecomings and award ceremonies, so many of these things are anchored and happen in the fall. What are your thoughts about planning to hold those types of events virtually? And what nuggets could you share with our audience?
Well, for us, we really, we had a couple of big ones that were coming up for us as well. Homecoming, and, for UConn, football is not big, but it's a component for homecoming, right? There's a homecoming game, there's lots of excitement. And to be honest, for us, we really early on during this pandemic decided that we were not going to focus our energies on homecoming in the same way for the fall. We just knew it wasn't going to happen the way that we would love to have it happen. And we actually pulled together a group and are working on a different type of event for the spring, probably virtual still, but not beholden to homecoming here at UConn. I think you still have to recognize, and you absolutely have to think about how to do that. And there's ways to do it. There are some really great people on this call actually who have done some galas. And for us, we did not do our big launching of our President Gala in April. And so we're trying to do this a little differently, putting our president in front of our small group of folks initially, and giving some more niche type of events. But use your technology too as it comes. Like we're going to have to think about how we're going to recognize some of our faculty award winners. And don't be afraid again to not try to shove everything in a traditional market. It might be that whether it's homecoming or a gala or an award, that you might have to think completely differently on how you're going to execute it. People still want to be recognized, but we have an opportunity to actually probably recognize them better. Without a tired meal, without some things that can actually, people will talk about all the time at the end of the day. So for us, looking at the way that we're recognizing alums and engaging them will be completely virtual for the next year. And we're not going to get tied down into holding it at that traditional time for UConn. For UConn, homecoming is very different. Our football stadium is not on campus. It doesn't have that same energy. But we know that our alums want to connect, and that's why we're looking forward to next year and doing it that way.
Thank you, Mo. There's some great advice there, and I'm just thinking about the need to ship a Tiffany's Crystal Award to 8 awardees, and if we really have to do that these days, because no one has ever complained about a gala being too short. And the tired meal is always the #1 thing in the alumni survey after the gala. So I think we're in a good place. Very well said. I also want to point to the chat for some resources. People have been talking a lot about wine tastings, which I guess is a staple of alumni relations that I should know more about, being closer here to Napa Valley. But there are some great resources about how to execute a virtual wine tasting that are really fun. So I encourage you to look to the chat on that. JT, this next question is for you. It comes from someone who is watching live from India, and it's a question about the future of alumni relations. So here it is. I want to do it justice. What is the future of alumni relations if international students might, for now and into the future, have a virtual experience, one that doesn't bring them to the US and on campus in person? How might we think about engaging that population when they become alumni? And is there anything to do differently there?
That's a lot of pressure. The future of alumni relations hangs on the balance of how I respond. Well, I think in Indiana, we have a pretty robust effort. We have a network of gateway offices, actually, including India. And so for us, we're positioned really well right now to the extent that as things evolve around the world, we have a physical outposts in places that actually still allow people to gather when they need to and when it's safe. So, and we have an enduring commitment to continuing that outreach. I don't think it's necessarily just about international students. You know, a lot of campuses are looking at hybrid ways for course delivery. There are a lot of universities that are completely virtual already. So I think what we have to do at the more residentially, massed educational structured places is use this as an opportunity to really innovate and learn how we can do things. One of the things I see too often is universities over invested in traditional on-location events, which are costly, time-intensive. And the reality is getting people tools to mobilize and connect online to achieve outcomes that help the institution and help alumni is really powerful. And I think this COVID crisis really creates an opportunity to accelerate that. Our board met in February last year and we were talking about accelerating digital initiatives. And there was some pushback because they thought that would be less personal. Well, right now it's one of the only ways we can all safely connect. So I think people's attitudes and behaviors are going to evolve and it's going to create new opportunities. So to me, the future is a hybrid future and probably one where we do more things with smaller numbers because our research has shown can actually move the needle on satisfaction and loyalty when you get people together in units of tens rather than these kind of ideas that we have to have hundreds of people in a room to call it a win. So digital tools, digital ways to connect, and then also really strategic personalization and curation of content and opportunities to connect. So I think it becomes a lot of a different model than the predominantly ancient now and increasingly quaint models where we want everybody to come back to campus or we go find the room with a big fancy chandelier and do those kinds of things. Those will happen, but they're going to happen much more intimate fashion, I believe.
Very well said, JT. I think this is a moment to create greater intimacy, not just among our international alumni, but in the connection between alumni and students. And here at Berkeley over this weekend, we hosted virtual welcomes that put alumni and students together in virtual rooms, both in China and India. And we had far more people in attendance than we could have managed for an in-person event. And thinking about countries as large as China and India, this was actually an opportunity to create community that could never have been accomplished in a ballroom of the Beijing Marriott. So we're very happy to have that opportunity.
Let me add something I should have said. In my travels around the world, one of the things I also see is that should be part of the answer is let's pay attention to what alums abroad are doing. Because in many cases, we have groups and chapters that are doing really cool stuff using the tools prevalent in their country to get together and to mobilize and to organize and create content. And so there's a lot to be learned by just paying attention to what they're doing and figure out how we might incent and encourage and develop the domestic US alumni to operate in similar fashion, particularly in large metropolitan regions.
Thank you, JT. I couldn't agree more with that. Mo, I'm going to come to you with our final audience question for today. And it's a good one. It's a real one, going back to our conversation about racial and social justice. So here's the big question. How do you combat, perhaps, an alumni base or leadership internally to the institution that are hesitant to address racial or social justice issues? Do you have any ideas about how to advocate for underrepresented groups in that type of environment?
Well, a few ideas that borderline a little, not militant, but I think it's constantly pushing and asking. I think many times because the powers that be aren't really incredibly receptive to it, that we as a group, whether that's a marginalized group, or anyone else, I can talk about gender here, we tend to back down. And so I think as we, when we sent out our email, there were definitely some people who were like, oh my goodness, you liberal university, how dare you attack higher education or anything like that. Battle, to JT's earlier point, on social media. We actually have to have conversations and we have to push for them. and push for the right people to be in the conversation. Many times it's only top leadership, but to be honest, sometimes top leadership, they don't have the bandwidth to actually execute. And so it is continually pushing to say, this is important. And what are our accountability measures? You can actually have accountability measures when you were talking about these types of things. And I think the fact that we're at a point now where we've tipped, it's to be expected that we're going to have these conversations and that we're going to act. And it's going to be painful at times to say that we want access to education for all is really a thing. And it's built up in how we actually manage our universities. And I've had conversations with alums who weren't happy about it, but I'm not going to shy away from it. But I also need other people around the university and in our work to help us move that agenda forward. Because again, to our point, it can't just be the people of color carrying that mantra. It has to be all of us in alignment saying, we are not going to stand for this. This is unacceptable. We're going to do how to open up the dialogue and have conversations and hold one another accountable. It's continue to press forward.
Thank you, Mo. Very well said to a complex and direct question. And I appreciate you and JT and Ralph being willing to be put on the spot like that by all of these audience questions that have come in. I'd like to transition now to the last part of our program, which is to invite previous speakers to come back and share with us their 1 minute of knowledge of what they have learned since we heard from them last. So to my colleagues here, we're ready for your rapid fire knowledge. In 1 minute or less, what insights have you gained since we heard from you last? And I'm going to go first to Jorge at UC Riverside. Jorge.
Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for inviting us back. I would say from my standpoint, how adaptable people are willing to be and also forgiving. Forgiving from the standpoint if things don't go the way they should, using different online platforms or technologies or different types of events is amazing. We also have, the other thing I would say is don't just do what you've always done and try to move it into an online platform. That, the idea of doing your board meetings like you've always done it, but now everybody's on Zoom. JT is correct. I think Ralph also said the same thing. Our meetings have become much more focused, much more concise, which is actually terrific. We've been planning for the fall, trying to figure out how we're going to approach homecoming and our alumni awards program. Initially we tried some things with our graduation, our online celebration. We were concerned that students did not want to have this virtual commencement take place. Remarkably, out of our 6,800 students that were eligible to participate in commencement ceremonies, more than 4,000 claimed their own personalized slide that they were able to upload. And we had more than 16,000 people participate in the online celebration, which clearly also included family members. But it's amazing not only in terms of what you're able to do, but also the types of access to resources that you have. And what I mean by that is we've been able to tap into alumni expertise that are in different regions that would not have come back to campus, but are willing to do something for you online. And that's been really a terrific way to engage folks that have not been very engaged through the years with the university. So that's what I found, is that people are willing to help, and people are looking for that sense of community. And it's nice when their alma mater comes calling.
Thank you, Jorge. And again, an opportunity for us to reflect on the community that we are creating here today, and everyone who is sharing their contact information in the chat. Jorge, you said something about having a slide at graduation. I had the good fortune of being able to assist at the graduation of my alma mater, the UCLA School of Music. Not only did our graduate students from the school get their own slide, they got to pick their own hype song, which I thought was a great opportunity. And I wish that I had had that. Okay, going next here to Susan. Susan, something that you can share with us, 1 minute or less.
Yeah, so good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Good to see so many friends up on the screen. There are a couple things, and Jorge just touched on it a little bit, as did Mo. digital engagement is here to stay, but it's inclusive. Think about the people who can't travel because of financial pressures, or those who have physical disabilities. They are now engaged in our world, and we're engaged in their world. That's a win-win-win, and we're always going to have some form of digital engagement moving forward. And you'll notice I call it digital engagement, not virtual. And even though I had a virtual reunion at Johns Hopkins, but I do that because virtual in the world of gaming is it doesn't exist. And this very much exists. And so I'm kind of adamant about digital engagement. The second thing is, I just want to remind everyone, this is not without cost, right? And everybody, our leadership especially, we're all going through budget cuts, and leadership is like, oh, well, you're not traveling, you're not putting on the galley, you don't have the food costs, you don't have the this cost, you don't have the rentals. That's true. But as Ralph touched on it, you redeploy those resources. So if you're going through budget cuts, make sure your leadership understands that there are costs associated with some of these larger games. We're having a demonstration of baking pies, and it's costly. I mean, it's not inexpensive. So just that. And the last thing is partnership with your campus allies. Now more than ever, we've learned that groundwork that we did years ago is paying off threefold now. So those are the three things that I would, lessons learned moving forward, at least at Johns Hopkins. That will go out. Stay safe, everybody.
I love that, Susan. So we're going to do wine and pie tasting for alumni, and that's going to solve all of our problems. Thank you. Chris, I'd like to turn to you for 1 minute as well. You, as a consultant and as a former Chief Alumni Officer, very interested in your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Thanks, everyone. Really enjoyed today's session. Fantastic panel and great speakers. Thank you to all the participants and the people that have been chatting and questioning in. Mine is straightforward and very simple. And I think it really is addressed, my comments are addressed to any alumni relations leader who is currently on this call. And anyone can take this message, but if you're a leader in this call, what I'm asking for and what I'm seeing in the industry is for you to give your team a gift. And that gift is to be absolutely clear and eliminate ambiguity with your team by saying, we are going virtual for the next 3, 6, whatever number of months is appropriate for your particular program, where you are in the country, etc. It's a simple thing, and you may have kind of assumed that it's been done, but to explicitly say it, it's one of the steps, one of the ingredients that I've seen in programs that have had success in this last 4 months. The leader has made it clear, we're going virtual and it's going to be for 6 months. And it was like liberating to see staffs, JT, Julie on this call, and a few others I saw do this months ago, and their programs have flourished. Some that are just doing it now are starting to see their staff sort of taking off and really running with things. If you haven't yet done it, do it now. You need to get permission and buy-in from leadership, your board, and other right people in the circle need to be involved in that decision, but you need to make that clear and just get rid of the ambiguity and say we're 100% virtual until X. And if, you know what, my other comment on this is, and if it's wrong, we have to go back to in-person. What a great problem to have to solve early, right? But let's at least get out of the gate with a statement like that and make it clear for your teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And something to add, again, to our Evolving Alumni Community of Practice t-shirt. We just need clarity. Julie, how are things going at UCLA?
Thank you so much, Jay, and ditto to so much of what these amazing panelists that you've gathered again today have said. And I also think we ought to start our next one, Jay. Everybody ought to give their hype song. I love that idea. So just a couple of things quickly to add. One of the biggest things for us is being nimble. That community is not only about the venue anymore, it's about how we create that in the spaces and the tools that we're all experimenting and using together. And also not getting caught up in Chris, I even say this from UCLA, that more is best. Every time now a staff member comes to me with a new idea, a new program, my comment is, okay, what are we going to take a pause on to create the space for you to add something on? And the only other thing that I would add, two things. One is totally agree, transparency is key at this point, especially given the challenges we're facing in the budget space. And even with that, I think it's more important than ever for us to reinforce with our teams a notion of, you got to take care of yourself. Even though we're working remotely, what are you doing to take a vacation? this summer? What are you doing to take care of you? And also to give people permission in the middle of the day to take that moment of vacation away from your screen. It's okay to take a walk in the middle of the day. When our work days have gotten so, there's no more boundaries anymore. So how can we help and reinforce our staff, particularly when we're concerned about a resource issue, that it's okay to take time, it's okay to take care of you, because that's important to the building and the creation of our community as well. So that's all I'll add for now, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I love that. Self-care has emerged as something that is not just to be talked about, but to be executed. And we have to hold each other accountable for that as well. Cindy, 1 minute from you. I'm eager to hear what's going on at UVA.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jay. A couple of things that I would say is that the power of intention is real. So when we started, we set out our goal of how many events, how many registrations. We made our events. We doubled our goal for registrations. And so I think that power of intention is huge for me. And so moving forward, what I'm learning is looking at data and looking at how are we deliberate in where we want to go. And for us, the deliberacy we are looking at for inclusion is really important. So how are we seeking a more diverse population for our alumni and faculty experts, our volunteer leaders? And instead of just sitting back and asking people to come in, we're reaching out and saying we want a inclusive, diverse volunteer boards, our faculty, and we're asking and reaching out in new ways. So that power of intention, we're going to change the course of where we're going because we're setting that out. So be intentful and be deliberate.
Thank you, Cindy. Again, some amazing nuggets from our previous panelists. That's some real rapid fire knowledge. Thank you. And another, especially to give thanks here to Mo and JT and Ralph who joined us for the webinar today. Thank you so much for your thoughtful insights to the questions we got through the registration and also those questions that came in during the conversation. I've said it before and I'll say it again, this is when our engagement industry shines. Working together for each other, there's almost nothing that alumni relations professionals cannot accomplish. And we have a big task before us this fall, as we've heard on the call today. I want to tell you a little bit about our project here, the Alumni Engagement Community of Practice here on your screen. Our idea is to bring together thought leadership without gurus. So as we have done today and in our previous sessions, to bring people into the conversation who are just like you, who are out doing the good work of alumni relations. We have a little website up now as well, where you can view all of our previous webinars. You can subscribe and also sign up for SMS texts from us. We hope you'll stay connected as you have been in watching this webinar and others as well. Finally, we'd like to be in touch with you. And so on your screen now, you see the contact information for myself and our three main panelists from today's conversation. We share these emails because we'd love to hear from you folks. And I also want to point out just what a great chat we've had at the session today. That will be included in the recording as well. A lot of people sharing links to plans around programs like scavenger hunts and other things, some practical knowledge that we could all lift and use from one another. So we would enjoy to stay in touch with you. Please take a moment to subscribe to our Alumni Engagement Community of Practice. Reach out to the panelists today and those we've had previously. And our best wishes to you, not just for the fall, but for a happy, healthy rest of the week. Thank you for joining us. Take care and bye-bye.